morning. Welcome to Inside Pages on Metro Television. My name is Aldo Moore. It's a pleasure coming your way. It's a beautiful Saturday morning. And here on Inside Pages, what we do essentially is that we look at the stories in the pages, the ones that we believe are very topical, that our viewers would want to hear sound, qualitative, and intellectual analysis about. We bring them to you and we essentially look at what the way forward is. Of course, we bring the right persons and ask them the relevant questions. My name is Aldo Moore. It's a pleasure once again coming your way. So finally, it's here. We saw it. We have been talking about it. Professor Jane Naana Opoku Ajimine, who has now been officially communicated to Ghanaians as being the running mate of the former President John Dramani Mahama, who is also the flag bearer and leader of the biggest opposition party, the NDC. We saw that ceremony. It was, to all intents and purposes, a very, very successful one. She talked about quite a number of things, but really, we're not just going to be doing an analysis of the things that she said. We're also going to be looking at really the Professor Jane factor in 2024. Really, what is she bringing to the table? And what does the choice of a female running mate say about the DNA, about the NDC and its ideology, etc., etc. But then the bottom line, because when you strip everything down, it's got to come down to how much votes she's going to bring to the NDC. There's been a lot of talk about the impact she's made in the central region, and the NDC saying that the number of seats that the party was able to flip in the 2020 elections was actually due to a tremendous contribution to the party. In fact, some people have actually attributed it squarely and fully to her. And again, what kind of person did we see on Wednesday, really? I mean, we know Professor Jane when she was adored in 2019, prior to the 2020 elections, and we saw a different Professor Jane compared to what we saw in 2020, what we saw actually on Wednesday. And we've got to ask the question, what can we attribute to what we saw? The energy, the momentum, the pot shots she was taking, the shading, etc., etc. What could possibly be accounting for that? Is it that she's learned on her own, or the NDC itself made it a point to actually work on her to make sure that she matures politically? So these are the kinds of conversations that we intend to have on Inside Pages. And I can tell you before we take our short commercial break that I have my guest, my able guest, who would help us navigate or would help us unpack all of these for us to be able to understand what we saw on Wednesday, especially for those of us who are mere mortals, the uninitiated who can't read in between the lines what really is happening. They would help us understand all of that on Inside Pages this morning. And let me say that the WhatsApp line is 0249155646. Today I want to do that early because I've been accused a few times for not, advertising the WhatsApp lines early. So 0249155646. 0249155646. So my producer tells me, take a short break. When we come back, introduce your guest, and then a conversation will start. Stay tuned in.
Our country, Ghana, over the last few years, has been buffeted by turbulent seas and has been sailing against a very strong headwind. Our leadership has been uninspiring and inept. We have lived under an administration that is unable to be truthful and honest to the people of Ghana and never accepts responsibility for anything. There can be no question in our minds that the effect of this maladministration has been so insidious and pervasive that today our people have lost faith and hope in not just the government of the day, but in our democratic system of governance. Ladies and gentlemen, our country needs an urgent reset. Our people need a leadership that is inspiring, one that will make our people believe and trust in our Ghana project once again, and believe in the hope of a better future. Ghana needs a leadership that will place value on integrity, truth, and accountability. Ghana needs a leadership that will roll up its sleeves and accept responsibility for our current reality and face the present storm stoically and steer the ship of state into safer and calmer waters. Ghana in its present crisis needs leadership that will do things differently, including sacrificing personal comforts to achieve a Ghana of shared prosperity for all of us, not just a few. The next 4 years will be pivotal for our country's destiny. The urgency required to take our country to the height it deserves will be matched by each waking day. If there was any indication of intent to think outside the box, to be innovative and use our best human resources to deliver the Ghana we all want, then it is in my choice of Jane Naana Opoku-Agyeman as my running mate.
Let me begin by saying that today marks a very important landmark towards our march toward victory 2024. And on occasions like this, we must assess ourselves and identify the risks ahead of our journey to victory. I don't intend to spoil the mood, but let me say that we are happy that the polls are projecting a massive victory for us, both for President Mahama and for a resounding majority in Parliament in 2025. But I like to caution that polls results alone don't constitute victory for any political party. And we must be aware that our opponents have a lot of money and they are going into the vote market with a lot of looted cash. One of the first major risks that we face is to pretend to compete with them in the game of vote buying. No matter what we do, we cannot mobilize enough resources to be able to compete with them in money politics. And indeed, they will be happy if we move the battle away from principles, from integrity, from honesty and truthfulness to the battle of who pays higher. So I'd like to caution all of us that don't let us abandon the tool we are more comfortable with and try to pick the tools that MPP is comfortable with. So let's remain a party of honesty, a party of truth, a party of integrity. And that is the only way we can defeat MPP. The second risk I want us to guard against is the risk of complacency. The polls figures tend to create a picture that we have already won. I like to caution everybody that we have not won yet. We are on the way to victory. But let's guard against complacency. Number 3, because we are already convinced that we are there, a lot of people have begun taking positions and fighting over who will be what in the next government. Indeed, some people are not only fighting about the positions they will occupy, They are telling all others that they will be the kingmakers and they will be making their appointments. If we are not careful, this will dampen the enthusiasm and the spirit of our followers. So I want to assure everybody that we are not there yet. Don't be fighting about positions. And don't be struggling about who will make appointments. Let us all go for the hunting first, and when we kill the game, we now argue about how to share the meat. Finally, a lot of us assume that we have won 2024 and that somehow we have succeeded in governing this country so well that Ghanaians will be willing to return us to power in 2028. So I can see orchestrations and movements towards positioning ourselves for what happens in 2028. I beg you, the name of our game now is Victory December 2024. Let us seek ye first the victory for December 2024, and all other things shall be added unto thee. Thank you very much, and may God bless us all. I wish to congratulate Professor J. Nano Pokwajeman for a wonderful day, and we hope, we have the firm belief that the party is solidly behind her and behind President John Dramani Mahama. And we have no doubt at all that he will perform wonders and restore the position of Vice President of the Republic of Ghana to its usual dignity. Thank you very much.
All right, welcome back. This is Inside Pages on Metro Television. My name is Aldo Moro. Just before we got here, we've been listening to the chairman or the national chairman of the NDC, that's John Singh Asedu Nketia, popularly known as General Mosquito. And then we also heard the former president and the leader of the NDC, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. But those were really poignant statements that the chairman made, didn't he? But anyway, we're going to be listening to Professor Jane herself, because that's the icing on the cake. We've just been, dealing, or we've just been working with the cake. We're not going to have the icing on the cake, and that's Professor herself. We're now going to be hearing some of the salient issues that she raised in that, speech that she gave during the official presentation of her by the NDC. That's midweek. That's on Wednesday. And then I will be, in fact, let me even introduce my resource persons before we do that. Let me just say that I have Professor Michael Professor White here is a lecturer at University of Ghana, Legon. He's a political strategist. He's a man of many hats. I'm not sure I'll be able to say all of that, but he's joined us in the studio. Good morning, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Mauro, and good morning to your
It's a
listeners.
pleasure. It's a pleasure. Let me also say that Professor John Osai Kwapong is a CDD fellow and also a political analyst. He's also joined us via Zoom. Prof, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. Prof, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and I can actually see you. Thank you so very much for joining us. All right. Let me also say that I'll be joined at some point by Mr. Eric Troom, who is a member of the New Patriotic Party's communications team. He'll also be joining us via Zoom to, help us get a feel of what the New Patriotic Party makes of, first of all, the choice of a female running mate, and also secondly, some of the issues that the good old Prof has raised and what they make of it. But at some point, I'll also be joined by Shamima Muslim. Shamima Muslim is the convener and founder of the Alliance for Women in Media Africa. Remember that she was actually the moderator of that event. She was the MC for the event as well. She'll be joining us at some point during the conversation. And Musa Dankwa is the Chief Executive Officer of Global Info Analytics. They have done some work prior to her choice or her selection as a running mate. And so he would help us appreciate much better what the woman, I'm talking about Professor Jane Opoku-Agyeman, what she's actually bringing to the table by way of votes, because he's a man of data, he's a man of numbers, so he'll help us appreciate all of that. And then there are other resource persons joining us as the program progresses. So let's watch Professor Jane Naana Opoku-Agyeman excerpts of some of the things that she said on Wednesday.
I will share in our collective successes and share responsibility for our setbacks, if any. And at the time of reckoning, Your Excellency John Dramani Mahama, I will not, in the advancement of self-serving ambition, declare to the whole world that I was only the driver's mate. Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before I go on to other important matters, please let me state my understanding of where we are as a country, as a nation, and the implications of what lay ahead. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is elitism masquerading as intellectualism. It is weakness strutting as courage, and crony capitalism masked as development in freedom. It is shameless hypocrisy pretending to be objective. This will never move our country forward. Rather, the most significant achievement of all these has been a country in near insolvency. Its natural resources such as water, land, and even the environment in rebellion. A people harassed and intimidated into numbness, and as some will say cynically, some of us also bribed into silence. I envisage a report on the administration of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama on the ticket of the NDC in his reign 2013 to early 2017. And I bet that the report will have no reference to the following: a multi-million dugout. I don't know about you, but the image I get looking at that hole is a trench in utter shock that anyone could believe it was intended as a Thanksgiving gift to the Almighty, invisible, God only wise. You will not find in his record a free SHS at war. The battle fought on the grounds of food, shelter, space, even calendar, teaching and learning materials, or those who spend a couple of weeks in school and many months at home just idling by. You will not find past questions instead of textbooks and science equipment. You will not find an atmosphere that suppresses learning. You will not find free water and electricity to a few that has turned out to be most expensive for everyone. Across the political divide, across social and professional groupings, among the youth, you hear complaints and stories concerning state capture, where this government has chosen to use its power not in the broader interests of all Ghanaians, but to favor a small clique. What is that? John and I have agreed that whoever has participated in the plunder of the state must be held accountable. And my friends, this is not a threat. It is a promise. It is a promise which is premised on the wishes of our citizens across the political divide, and it is hinged on the principle of accountability. Let us face the facts. Today, what do we hear? It's the promotion of ethnocentric elitism, which is masquerading as intellectualism. You will not find him as president clearing malfeasance and writing love letters to prejudice a bad situation. You will not find that unemployment jumped from 8 to 14%. And actually check the figures. Check the actual figures. Go beyond the percentages. And you will not find a debt to GDP that has gone a wall, or a city that refuses to be tamed. Under his tenure, you will not find weak efforts to hide the truth of Dumsor. The reports will not include scandals surrounding the PDS, Australian visa, Keldon GVG, Boss contaminated fuel, excavate.
Right, so those were excerpts of that speech that the good old Professor Naana gave at the UPSA auditorium on Wednesday, and we intend to do our own analysis here with my very, very distinguished and powerful guest who joined us. As I did indicate, Professor Michael White is a University of Ghana lecturer. He's also a political strategist, a political communications avatar, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. Eric Chung will also be joining us via Zoom shortly. He's a member of the New Patriotic Party's communications team, and also Professor John Osai Kwapo. He's a CDD fellow and also a political science analyst as well. He is also joining us. And also Shamima Muslim, he's the founder and convener of the Alliance for Women in Media Africa. At some point will also be joining the conversation. Let me start with Prof. Now, Prof, once again, it's good to have you in the studio. I mean, I've heard quite a number of people say that, so first of all, let me rather put it this way. What do you think went into the choice of a female as a running mate to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama?
Thank you very much.
Relative to the ideological standing or leanings of the NDC.
All right, so thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers. I think that, first of all, what the choice of Professor Naana illustrates is the consistency of President Mahama.
Right.
Prior to her, confirmation, and I use the word confirmation, or prior to being chosen, there were all kinds of other senior party people whose names were flying all over social media, creating the impression as though, the public was, or people were trying to kind of stampede the former president into changing the good old Prof.
Right.
But President Mahama, I think, was fully convinced that the factors that informed his choice in 2020 are still very relevant today. Right. And some of those factors actually include the NDC's long-standing belief, largely foregrounded on its philosophy, that democracy is better nourished when all segments of the social demography are included in the decision-making processes.
Right.
I think we all know the stories of women and how they have been marginalized over the years, and the efforts, particularly since the 1980s and 1990s, to ensure that women receive equal measure of attention in the area of education and also in the formal labor market and so on and so forth.
Right.
And I think Professor Naana comes across as somebody who has blazed the trail, gone through the system. She didn't come across as somebody who had everything on a silver platter. Went to public school, went to several other schools, and then eventually emerged as a top-notch woman who did not only become the first female vice chancellor of a public university, but also has, occupied several high-profile international positions as well. And yet also has a very humble and affable and personable personality. And that, to a very large extent, is something that we need in our body politics. But beyond that, in Ghana today, there are more women than men. According to the Ghana Statistical Service.
52%.
Absolutely. Women are far, far more than men.
Right.
And if democracy is about the rule of the majority, then if we don't have it in its perfect sense, the highest ticket of decision-making should definitely include women. And I think there couldn't have been any better choice than a woman who had also proven in public service that she has what it takes to actually take that position, hold it, and perform creditably. We know of Professor Naana's record in education. We know of her records as Vice Chancellor in UCC. It does appear that within the framework of governance in the universities, there isn't any position she hasn't held, from head of department to dean to director, all the way down to becoming a vice chancellor. And in all these positions, there has not been a single, issue raised about her capability, her performance, her diligence, her integrity. And so I think that this is a perfect choice because she brings to the ticket a compassionate, feeling for the ordinary person. And then, anytime you engage Professor Naana, first conversations about the market women, the ordinary youth on the streets, and people who are, finding things difficult in life and how best we can activate, state policies to ensure that they also get opportunities to have a meaningful life. So I think this is, great. It is very useful that she has been retained. And I think beyond that, this is actually in conformity with the trend in Africa now. Right. Before Professor Naana's choice, several other African countries have made women part of the presidential tickets. Right. South Africa did, Uganda did, Tunisia did, Malawi did, Zimbabwe did, Zambia did, Gambia did, Tanzania did. And so we basically are falling in line with, the global trend of making sure that, women are actually included. Right. And not just included, not as a sign of tokenism, but that women of high caliber qualifications and expertise given the opportunity to actually shape public policy. Yeah. Largely also because, for the most part, they tend to bear the brunt of conflict and of bad governance. And so when given the opportunity, they could bring some of that insight into policy making or the spaces of policy making. Right. And so I think that we in the NDC obviously should be very excited. I was in the auditorium when she delivered the speech, and I can tell you, in spite of the applause and everything, a large majority of people were held spellbound, very, very attentive, trying to capture every single, phrase, sentence, and word that was coming from. And the speech, in my view, was delivered, really wasn't read. It was delivered. It was delivered. Delivered because the times demand so. Right. And I think she spoke to the heart of this country in many ways. The things that are going on that people have been shying away from publicly talking about. Somebody in her demeanor actually speaking about the issues the way she did without necessarily mudslinging anybody or without necessarily openly, casting slurs and insinuations at anybody in particular. That's interesting. But laying the facts as they were, actually, I think it's incredibly great.
And we'll get to the point where we'll have the conversation about the substance of what she said, and I'll get you to tell me what you think of it. But You made a point which I thought was quite interesting. You talked about the fact that this choice, beyond the elections, but it also goes to speak volumes about what the philosophical, how do you call it, the philosophical underpinnings of the NDC and so on. But you also said something about, in fact, at some point, there were some people who actually felt that she shouldn't be the person to partner John Mahama because of what they called her demeanor. Now, they said her demeanor looked more like a lecturer and not a quintessential politician, which is that they're looking for somebody who can do the everyday give and take, kind of, politics. Not necessarily somebody who was going to speak as an intellectual per se, but the masses struggle to relate to the intellectuals. And so why do you put up an intellectual in leadership positions? The masses struggle to relate to them. And so the other persons who were being talked about were persons who were seen as persons who can relate to the masses much better. What does this say about our level of maturity when it comes to our appreciation of who should rather be in leadership positions?
Well, I think it says a lot, particularly in the case of the NDC, because you recall that similar things were said about Professor Mills.
Yes.
When former president, the late
Rawlins
former president, made the choice of President Mills. In fact, until his choice, many people have not really heard of him at the time. It was, I think, at Internal Revenue or something of the sort.
Yes.
And
at the time, it was IRS.
Yeah, taught at Legon for several years. And so people were like, who is this person? I mean, but over time, people came to realize that, yes, even though he was an intellectual and a professional to the core, he was also so down to earth, and that his thinking and everything were more about the ordinary people than anything else. And today, of course, he didn't live to finish his first term, but he remains one of the leaders of this country that has endeared himself to people across the political divide, even including people who had previously insulted him.
Right.
And I think that we are seeing a similar trend play out in the case of Professor Naana Opoku-Agyeman. If you don't know her, you don't know her. But if you know her, and I think that people are getting to know her better now. So perhaps it was okay when people didn't know her very well to be a bit iffy here and there. But it is obvious now that people are getting to know her better now. And particularly for ordinary people, especially people who are working in, let's say, the markets, on the streets and everything, they may be the people who will be feeling like, well, this person is an intellectual, how can I get close to her? But I think what Professor Naana has demonstrated is that this category of people are probably more dear to, her heart and her thinking and her vision and her capability and what she intends to bring to the ticket than, anything about elites. And let's also be clear, and I think she kind of hinted at that. Being an elite, being an intellectual does not necessarily mean that you should be seen as somebody who is distant from the ordinary people. A good intellectual is the one who uses the expertise of his intellectual standing in society to connect to the larger masses of the people by way of trying to understand them and trying to, as it were, get a sense of what their lived experiences are and see how best, solutions in terms of government programs can be designed and framed so that they can provide some opportunity for meaningful livelihood for those people as well. And I think the NDC has been at this, but it's because it did not happen in a radical way, people didn't notice. This is a party that appears, and rightly so, to be deeply committed to inclusivity, trying very hard to make sure that this society is held together no matter what. And I think this is also based on a certain recognition that we are a highly multi-ethnic society as a country. We can deceive ourselves as much as we want. We haven't attained nationhood yet. And so it appears that part of the strategy is to ensure that at all points in time, the party positions itself to be the glue that holds this country together and ensures that everybody feels belonging to the larger fabric of the society. And I think Professor Jane represents that in many ways. In the coming days, I am sure as she moves to the
Central region.
yes, moves not
move
only to
around.
the central region, but
gonna move
moves
around the
across the country to speak to people. She will be received very well, and I am sure that she will also be seen indeed as somebody who really should be given the opportunity as the vice president of this country. She's going to bring honesty to the tickets, and I think that is one thing that has been missing, and she hinted at that also in her speech. She's going to bring integrity to that. I mean, when you think of the vice presidency under President Mills, and you think of the vice presidency under President Mahama, if you think of the vice presidency even under former Vice President Aliu, and you think about it now, you could see that the position has completely taken a downward trend in terms of reputation and integrity. And that, restoring that particular position to its place of pride is key. And I think that the NDC, in this case, I believe we have made the right choice.
Something doesn't add up, and I'll need you to help me with this. And maybe Professor Sai would also want to comment on this. So you have a political party that has produced a professor as both a flag bearer and also consequently becoming a president. May he so rest in peace. I'm talking to Professor John Evans Tamils. Now you have another professor who's now the running mate for John Dramani Mahama, and I can count a number of professors who are the lecturers, who are in active NDC business and so on. So where from this narrative that the NDC is anti-intellectual, or the NDC doesn't have that many intellectuals in the world? You're not. If you want to be an intellectual, then don't associate with the NDC. I mean, how do you explain this paradox?
I think it is because as a country we have confused being an intellectual with being an elite, or posting yourself or presenting yourself as an elite.
Explain.
There are many intellectuals in the NDC, many academics in the NDC, who probably wouldn't want to really be seen as, elites necessarily.
Right.
And they are very simple, in terms of how they appear, in terms of how they speak, in terms of the places they hang out, in terms of the people they hang out with. And so when people see them, they are like, oh, NDC doesn't have intellectuals. I can tell you that this party's backbone, in terms of ideational backbone, is a large army of intellectuals laced across the universities and other spaces of research in this country.
You mean both here and abroad?
I'm telling you, both here and abroad, and across different regions in this country. Over the last several years, that has even become more obvious with the emergence of the progressive intellectuals, where, thousands of academics and, people who have an intellectual background have basically converged using social media platforms to persistently discuss issues of nationhood, and then also the philosophy of the party and how to ensure that we continue to provide the necessary ideational ammunitions to arm the functional and the functional and national executives of the party, the communicators of the party. And as we even work on the manifestos now, these are things that are not done in the open of cameras. But if you see the caliber of people who converge on regular basis to work on these things, you'll be like, is this really NDC? And so I think it is the optics. The optics in the sense that what people tend to see in the public and their interpretation of it is significantly different from what the real situation actually is. Look, this is the party who had Professor Awudo of blessed memory.
The renowned poet.
A renowned poet. And this is the party that has can also count on several other, intellectuals across the length and breadth of this country as its members, not just sympathizers. And so, it raises a fundamental question of whether the narrative is actually very accurate.
So when you hear the vice president say the NDC doesn't read, you hear MPP communicators say the NDC doesn't read. And they've been very intentional about it.
Of course, it was based on this notion of what to do with propaganda. Propaganda is to basically continue repeating possibly a lie for as long as it takes until even the individuals who are being framed or about whom the lie is being told begin to believe that indeed the lie is true. And that is what the MPP has over the years specialized in. And they have done that also to their own detriment, in the sense that even when they assumed the reins of government, they never for a moment thought that it was time to put propaganda aside.
Right.
And so you hear the vice president say all manner of things that obviously are outright lies and untruth, and gets away with it. But now Ghanaians are wide awake and are beginning to raise questions. And people are actually questioning whether the position of the vice president as we have it now wasn't, a monumental mistake that the country has made, because it does appear that we have just been packaged with a completely...
But you talked about the optics, and the optics... well, let me see if I understood exactly what you're saying. The optics that the NDC tends to display by way of not publicly touting themselves as being who they are. So I'm a professor of that, professor of that, professor of that, but then would want to actively engage the NDC quietly or behind the scenes and so on. And so not making persons who have been told that the NDC doesn't have that many intellectuals continue to believe that narrative. Don't you think that posture that the NDC has is also affecting it or hurting it? Because we're being told, for instance, it's not we're being told, but the fact actually is there for everybody to see that usually when you come to the campuses, the NDC struggles to win elections on campuses. Do you think it's time for a rebranding, sort of?
Obviously, parties...
Unless, of course, you have a different, understanding of why the NDC struggles on the
Parties like the
campuses.
NDC will have to constantly and continually rebrand themselves based on what the socio-economic context actually puts out. And I can relate to this notion of young people coming from NDC families, fired up, get into the universities, and then by the time they are finishing, you can see that they are standing in NDC is wobbling, or to some extent making a shift or transition into the MPP.
Yeah.
And I think this is based on a certain wrong perception that the NDC is a party that defends poverty. No, the NDC is a party that rather works to defeat poverty. And so that particular narrative needs to be calibrated properly. Nobody wants to grow poor.
But perhaps it's not finding expression in the way you look.
I agree that it's not finding expression, but also because many of the high-profile NDC intellectuals, professionals, and businessmen oftentimes carry themselves around in a very simple and a very ordinary manner. And
do you think your Ghanaians will appreciate that?
No, we associate
the simplicity.
We associate professionalism and intellectualism with a certain physical outlook and a certain social standing. Yeah, showmanship. And I think that the simplicity of a lot of the NDC intellectuals and people of high professional backgrounds have been misconstrued to mean that the NDC doesn't really have those people, when indeed it actually have, those people almost everywhere in this.
But if I'm a young man and I'm on the University of Ghana campus and the national youth organizer of, say, the MPP comes in, I look at the way he's dressed, wearing perhaps some expensive
Are you suggesting we don't dress well?
No, I'm not saying, I'm not talking about dress, not dress. There's a difference between just dressing well and dressing well and also looking panache.
Yeah.
Looking... looking loud, for want of a better word. So you have the New Patriotic Party youth organizer that comes in, and he's dressed in a particular way. The youth organizer of the NDC comes, he's also dressed in a particular way. But then I see a certain sense of, what's the word? But I feel that the MPP guy looks more like, or I actually smell the elitism.
Yes,
and so in the way the youth organizer looks like, and I want to be like him because he's wearing a Giorgio Armani,
I get a point you're making, but
and yet Professor Michael Kwesa-White, assuming he was a youth organizer, probably 10 times richer than him, 10 times more intelligent than him, but he decides to wear some simple Ghanaian, this man.
It takes the young people a long time.
No, we're very impressionable.
I agree. It takes the young people a long time to realize that. Those physical outlooks in terms of putting on expensive clothes and putting up those kinds of false appearances and driving, expensive cars and whatever the case may be, really is not what brings you to the aspirations that you want in life. Look, when I say people from our side appear normally very simple, I mean that they are decently dressed, but you will not see them. Most people will probably wear some African print, nicely done and everything. They are
Simply
not
put, you're not flashy.
They are not flashy. They are not in suits. They are not, flaunting it all over the place.
Yes.
We have seen over the last 7 years in this country that the folks who said they have the men, are now struggling to find where their own men are. And if you like, look, let me give you a simple assignment. Take all the people who were appointed under former President Mahama, right? Ministry by ministry, agency by agency, and compare them to the people who have been appointed under President Akufo-Addo, one after the other, and look at the pedigrees and ask yourself whether we have gone forward or we've gone backwards. And you'll be shocked. So there is a huge perception out there that we need to dismantle.
Okay.
And I think dismantling it requires a bit of branding, a bit of deliberate and intentional ways of how we present and project our party, particularly to young people, so that they will understand that their place in the universities today is made possible by the NDC, which had over the years committed itself to providing opportunities in terms of expanding infrastructure in tertiary institutions for young people to be able to gain admission and go into those schools.
Okay.
And also to making sure that we let them understand that they can be with the NDC as a party, work within the party, and also achieve their career dreams and aspirations as well.
Let me, as usual, what I do is, Professor John Osakop, and I hope you don't have a problem with that, because typically what I do is I get the politicians to express or to state their positions, and then you come in as the arbiter to tell us what you make of what MPP and NDC have said. So I hope you don't have a problem with that at all. Okay, all right, and I also hope you're enjoying the angle we've decided to take this this conversation in terms of what the whole Professor Jane thing means for the image of the NDC, which is seen or perceived as either one an intellectual, group of unintellectuals, two as a party for poor people, which Professor White has dispelled quite strongly and said it's just a certain propaganda which some persons have bought into. It's absolutely not true, and so on and so forth. So let me come to Mr. Eric Chum. Mr. Eric Chum, good morning. It's good to have you. Eric Chum is a member of the MPP's communications team. He's also joined us. Eric, it's good to have you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. As always, it's been a while.
Right. Eric, there's a conversation we're having just before you joined us, and I know you enjoy these kinds of conversations. I'm talking about, please put on your video, Eric, if you don't mind.
Because I'm in a vehicle.
You're driving.
I told you I had to go on a. Yeah,
okay, you're being driven. Sorry, you're being driven.
Stop over at another sister station to do this thing again.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
I mean, what do you make? I don't know whether you were listening to my conversation with Professor White, and whether you have something you want to chip in before we go to the substantive issue of what you make of Professor Jane Naana Opoku-Agyeman's speech. Do you have anything you want to say about the image of the NDC, how sometimes you and not you as you in particular, but some MP communicators tend to create a certain impression that there's a group of unintellectuals, and they talk about NDC doesn't read, and then you have a situation where you have the same political party that keeps producing these intellectuals at the very forefront, vice president, president, and now we have another one who is now the running mate to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. You have anything you want to say relative to this conversation before we move to the main issue?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that if we start an ideological debate, we will not even finish today. My view is that the NDC is actually a victim of its own inconsistencies and a certain siege mentality that they've created over a period. So that it's almost as if that, it's very left-wing, socialist, inferior tactics that they've adopted over a period, whereby it becomes an amalgamation of groups and persons who feel that they're being either alienated or marginalized, and then comes into some kind of grouping. So even for them, they have in times past actually defined themselves as an electoral or election-winning machine. So you can't try to, if you like, create a certain brand equity and then decide that you want to be seen in a different light after a few years. I mean, that what you present is what people would actually see and appreciate. And so this whole conversation around who is an intellectual, for example, and who is not an intellectual, I mean, I'm sure once we delve into that, even that debate itself would actually pale into insignificant. For example, I mean, from time immemorial, look at the persons that the New Patriotic Party has presented as flag bearers and even presidential candidates. I mean, so even if you want to go as far as our history or antecedents, and you go from the likes of Professor Buzia and come all the way to Dr. Professor Dubois and J. Kufuor, Akufa, none of these individuals are people that you cannot define as intellectuals. You understand what I'm saying? But that's not even the conversation. So the NDC itself would present, let's say, a Professor Mills, and you have, I mean, I don't know to mention names, you have persons who will be going around touting themselves as propaganda secretaries and all of those things, speaking a lot of things that I cannot repeat on morning TV. And so in one breath, you present a professor, in another breath, you have rogues and people touting themselves as whatever. On the political landscape. And so, I mean, they are responsible for their own, if you like, definition that people define them. So, for example, if you have a leading member of the NDC going after, let's say, a moderator of a Presbyterian church, for example, and then say all sorts of things and cast aspersions and all of this, and then in one breath you say that, anytime the NDC finds itself in office or in power, you have people in civil society, the clergy, and other interfaith organizations not even appreciating whatever it is that they are doing, or even because if MPP finds itself in power, these same groups do not probably give them as much interrogation and scrutiny as they would do for the NDC. That is the doing of the NDC itself. You know, and I can give you a plethora of examples. So if you have a party that also prides itself on a certain revolution, and we all know the consequences of that so-called revolution and how it actually sent this country back in terms of development and the kind of things that happen in under those two revolutions. That is what the NDC's democratic credentials are leveraged on, and a revolution that killed judges and killed people. People got missing in this country, and people lost their businesses and all of those. And so you can't now come round and try to portray a totally different narrative just because you put somebody who has a title on his name as a flag bearer or as a running mate. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, people, we all live in a society, we all live within our communities. Everybody within a community will know who the NDC persons are and who the MPP persons are. And Ghanaians are able to basically, differentiate between who an MPP person is and who an NDC person is, and what kind of moral integrity and standards that these people would show and reveal. And so for me, I don't think that we want to even go
That's
into
fine.
that. It was actually, it was actually. If you want us to dovetail into, dovetail into their choice of running mate, I'm more than happy to
exactly.
to
That's actually the main thing. But so you know, I'm sure you watched the program. I'm sure you heard. You either watched or you listened to it on radio. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, you know, in my orientation, Moro, as for me, my initial inclination is to wish the NDC well. And as far as I'm concerned, congratulate them for going through a process of choosing a running mate. I didn't really understand the need for the outdooring, to be honest with you, because as far as I was concerned, the running mate has been known for the last few weeks or so, and she's been a running mate in the past. So maybe it was just one platform for them to go and say the same things that we know. And some of the things that were said on that particular platform actually points to the very inconsistency of the NDC. So in one breath, they are unable to actually tell Ghanaians what their policy initiatives are and what they are going to do if ever they were given an opportunity. In another breath, they're asking everybody to calm down, to win the election first, kill the game before the booty is shared. You know, so for me, yes, we wish them well. I would not be the one to sort of cast aspersions or say derogatory words about any political person. I've never done that. But for us as an MPP, we are focused. We are making sure that everything that needs to be done in the prosecution of the 2024 campaign is done. And then we will go to the good people of this country and tell our story. And I think that we have a very good story to tell. And I mean, even by common strategy and tactics, our focus should not be on the NDC. Our focus should be on making sure that we have assistance in place, mechanisms in place, and the ability to go around the country and engage the good people of this country and tell them our side of the story and be able to convince them that the choice that you are making is a choice between progress, innovation in the next chapter of our development as a country, and somebody who has been there and the good people of this country had actually rejected. You know, so that is what it is. I mean, so you ask the Ghanaian people, do you want to move forward? Do you want to make sure that we have what it takes to develop as a country in 2025? That is what we would be talking about. And so in terms of the choice of a running mate, yes, I've heard so many things about why it's supposed to be.
Okay. Okay. Eric, I'm sure that we have a connection challenge to
Talk space as well. Then,
okay.
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying that. But once you come into the political space, then you also have to be ready to be scrutinized and your performance in public space interrogated. You know, so if the same running mate that we are talking about was a former education minister, and it was under her watch that students were even clamoring for chalk. It was under her watch where students were given uniforms that were 3 or 4, 5 sizes bigger than them. It was under their watch, even in her own handing over notes, where the capitation grant was in default. All of these things that teachers were teaching for 12 months, 18 months, and were just being paid 3 months because they didn't have the assistance in place, and even the comprehension to appreciate the struggles that these teachers have gone through. So we can interrogate that. Once you interrogate these things, then you're not to be seen to be either antagonizing or being negative. But the reality is that once you put yourself up for public service and there's a basis to go back and audit whatever it is that you have done, we are allowed to do so. And that's fair game. And I don't understand why the NDC all of a sudden gets extremely jittery when the stewardship of the good old professor comes into question. And we'll have those conversations. And if you promise 120, 200 e-blocks and you're able to only deliver 29, we would ask these questions. You understand? So for me, I honestly don't see how we should be feeling jittery as a political party and losing focus because the NDC have chosen a female running mate. We have equally competent, acclaimed women in our parties. And this party and this government has shown we have the first female chief of staff. We have so many firsts when it comes to females in our political conversation. And so I'm sure maybe in the near future it will happen. I mean, if it does happen, yes, we will celebrate that. But once you come into the public domain and you have a record that we would have to interrogate, we will do that forcefully. That doesn't mean that I mean, the mere fact that she's female, that doesn't mean that we are trying to antagonize her. But the reality is that she's seeking public office, and she's had public office in the past. And this is the same John and Jane combination that we defeated, and we are going to do that again. And so, for me, yes, it's good they blanched or what do you call it, unveiled a running mate. But the reality on the ground is that we have to go out there and prosecute a campaign.
Okay. So, Eric, essentially what you're saying is that the NPP is not bothered. You can't be bothered about who Professor Jane is and what she brings to the table by way of what generally has been said to be her integrity, her gravitas, I mean, her international, profile, and so on and so forth. You're not really bothered about that. I've heard some people say, so how then do you respond to people who say that this certainly, after listening to her on Wednesday, it is definitely going to put a lot of pressure. I mean, you work closely with the vice president. I know that for a fact. And that is really going to put a lot of pressure on the vice president to perhaps look for somebody in high kind of caliber to sort of match her. So it is pound for pound, boot for boot, and not boot for Chalewate. I mean, how do you respond to people who say that?
You know, they can tickle themselves and laugh. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we will not be taking political strategy lessons from the NDC. And in any case, I mean, when you're talking about integrity and she's standing or she's found in the same space as John Mahama, who has been president before, who has a record, who the Ghanaian people rejected. The same NDC, is it the same NDC? Is it the same NDC that we are talking about? So you can speak. I mean, she's an English professor, right? So she can put words together and wax lyrical, and all of those things. But the reality is that you're standing on a platform, claiming integrity, asking for people to give you an opportunity, and you're in the same space as John Mahama and the NDC, and that record is there for everybody to appreciate. You know, so that's what I'm saying. That's why I see the inconsistencies and even to a certain degree the hypocrisy. You know,
but Eric,
so
are you suggesting that the persona of the person who's standing on the platform of a political party doesn't matter? Let's even assume that that political party is seen in a certain light. You're saying that the values that the person brings to the ticket doesn't matter?
No, but those are things that are going to be interrogated by the Ghanaian people. And I'm saying that you can't sit on the same platform and claim integrity when in a few years down the line, a few years ago, we were telling teachers that you were not going to be given chalk. Or you are not going to pay nursing training allowances, and you're not going to pay teacher training allowances. Where is that? Where is the integrity? Or even with scrapping,
is that really a case of
research allowances for lecture? No, I'm asking. So you're asking me a question.
No, I'm trying to. Eric, I need you to.
It's one thing saying, yeah.
No, I need you.
It's one thing saying something, and it's one thing being held to the substance of your performance and stewardship. You understand what I'm saying? And so the choice for the Ghanaian people is to make a decision based on innovation, progress, being progressive, and looking into the future, as opposed to a team that have actually chosen their flag bearer more than a year and a half ago. I've chosen.
Okay. Eric Amakuchum, I guess we're having some challenge with your connection, with your Zoom connection. Okay. So because we're having challenge with the connection to Eric Amakuchum's Zoom link, let's now go to Professor John Osai Kwapon. Prof, you are not a politician. You play within the civil society space. You are an analyst. You're an academician too. Doc, are you with me? Are you with me, sir? Hello, Professor John Osai Kwapon.
No, I mean, can you tell me
Okay, so Eric, we're having some challenge with the connection. So let's please try and reestablish connection with us so that we can continue with this conversation. But Prof, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Now, Prof, help us describe the Professor Jane we saw on Wednesdays compared to the Professor Jane we saw in 2020. What has changed in your estimation?
Well, good morning to your viewers. Good morning to everyone else on the panel. I think that 4 years has come with being more, at least from where I sat, she wasn't one that I saw, at least publicly, very deeply involved in NDC politics. Probably in the background she was, but the Professor Naana Jane that we saw, or at least I saw in 2020, was not one that I had seen very involved in NDC politics. So I think that was, in my estimation, one of the challenges that she faced, especially to that the announcement of her choice as running mate, I think, came a little too close to the election. Yes, it was a couple of months, but I felt that it didn't give her enough time to really tell her story of involvement in politics and establishing some kind of connection with the Ghanaian people. I mean, she's by no means, she's really a very well-accomplished person. I'm sure those who have encountered her and interacted with her in the hallways and corridors of academia will testify to that. But when it came to politics, for some of us, it required an introduction and getting to know her. And I think time wasn't too much, on her side. So if I think back to her 2020 speech when she was introduced to the public, I think it felt somewhat measured. So yes, it struck the right themes and the right tones, but I also feel like it was somewhat measured. But then if you look at the 2024, you can tell that in 2024, it's very different. She's had 4 years to be even more involved with the party, to even build a much stronger relationship with former President John Mahama. I mean, she's worked with him in the past, and he vouches for, her integrity and a whole lot of other reasons as to why, he chose her and decided, to maintain her. But if you look at the speech this week, you do see that she came to really phrase the election in terms of what it is about and what is at stake. And it was quite interesting to see her, as I describe it in my daily graphic article today, taking the fight right to the doorsteps of the NPP. Something that I didn't see in her speech in 2020. Which also gives me the impression that she would be playing the role of one of the chief prosecutors of this year's election in making the case against the NPP and why they shouldn't be retained in office. So yes, you do see a difference when you compare 2020 to 2024. But time does work in favor of some of these things in terms of how you sort of play in the space and the kind of politician that you become.
I see. Let me now move to Shamil Muslim. Prof, just hang on a minute, because I'm going to ask about what the Professor Jane effect is likely to look like in 2024 elections, and whether the MPP must be ready or the MPP must be concerned. Okay, so Shamima is not on yet, so I'm going to come back to you, Prof. Now, when you strip everything off, as I did say in the beginning of my introduction, it's going to come back to votes, because she must justify her choice by bringing in as much vote as possible, as some political analysts would say. Do you agree with that, that this is just about vote, or this has got to be looked at beyond just how many people she can actually attract to the NDC?
I mean, yes, every political party wants to win an election. And so, in the selection of a presidential candidate as well as a running mate, they cannot lose sight of the political implications of that. The thing is that we are still yet to, at least based on the empirical evidence, we are still yet to come to a point of convergence on the exact impact that we believe a running mate has or does not have on an election outcome. So let me quickly share some of that with you. So in 2016, Professor Usu-Mensah was the first person to have ever asked that question in an election poll, which was, the impact of the VP or the running mate on your decision on who you want to vote for. Overall, 51 said no. It doesn't impact that. But when you disaggregate it, because he did that poll in 5 regions in a number of swing constituencies, the picture was mixed. So in Greater Accra, in the northern region, majority said yes, it does impact. In Bro and Hafu, majority said no. In Central region, majority said no. In Western, they were split. Half said yes, half said no. Then you fast forward to 2020, myself and 2 colleagues did a poll, and one of the questions we asked again was on the role of the running mate. Overall, only 25% said yes, it does influence their decision. But then when you disaggregate it, 59% said it would influence the choice of Prof. Naana would influence their decision to vote for JDM. And only 49% said it would influence their decision to vote for the MPP in terms of Dr. Baumia as running mate. Then you fast forward to 2024, and if you look at the Global Info Analytics poll, 60% do approve of her choice as running mate to JDM. Among the NDC, 79%. Among those who call themselves MPP is 49%. The only thing that I found very curious in that poll was that still the gap, if you look at the gap when they started polling before JDM announced her, the gap was about 67 to 27% NDC. However, the gap is now only 51-45 in the central region. So yes, the bottom line is bringing the votes that matter, but I don't still see a clear picture emerging yet in terms of the extent to which it would matter. So yes, if you look at Global Info Analytics, the decision is well received. If you look at past polls, the sentiment is somewhat mixed. And then to think that the gap is not that much, particularly post her nomination, I think a few more polls and election day would actually demonstrate, but the impact. But for me, her nomination is much bigger than the votes that she would bring to the NDC and this year's election. I've always said that we keep talking about women in our politics, in our governance spaces. We keep saying that we are committed. We keep saying we want to see more. And for me, that commitment must be demonstrated in very intentional ways. And it is not only through saying, well, go and run for MP or go run for some other elected office. Sometimes some of those intentional ways is through using your appointment power, whether it's to appoint a minister, some CEO, or whether it's the choice of a running mate. And yes, we've seen other women in the past, but this for me is the first time that we all know that we have a duopoly, right? We've been rotating NDC, NPP. That I believe is going to continue for a long time. So for me, this is the first time that one of the parties in the duopoly is proceeding in this intentional manner to show and demonstrate its commitment to, increasing women in our politics and governance spaces by giving us potentially the first female vice president. So again, for me, it's two things. Yes, the potential of the votes that she brings to the NDC, which, as I've described, the Ghanaian sentiment on the effect of the running mate is somewhat mixed. But at the same time, her nomination is well received if you look at global info analytics. But more importantly, also, should the NDC win, this would also be, historic.
I see it. So nobody should take this woman for granted as they may have taken her in 2020, because you're saying that she's no more a rookie politician. She has grown, she's mature, even in terms of her political communication, her political language. She now has assumed a different persona. So anybody, whether opposition or neutrals or whoever you call yourself, who thinks that you can write her off, you may be making a very big mistake. I think that's what I got from the submission you've just made.
Precisely. And her pedigree was never in question. I think it was just her active involvement in politics that, because some didn't observe that, right? There were questions about, back then in 2020, whether, quote unquote, she was ready. Okay. But again, 4 years later, and looking at this speech, I believe that, at least this is another demonstration of, her readiness to, to engage. Like I said, I see her playing one of the roles of chief prosecutor in this.
I noticed something though, just briefly before we have to take a break. But that's something I noticed just quite quick, rather interestingly, that the MPP has decided to deploy the female communicators to go at her and attacking, basically her performance. When she was education minister, by saying, well, during her time, even talks for kids to, write on their boards and so on, were not in adequate supply. So basically to say that she didn't do well as education minister. I don't know what kind of strategy you're reading into this. The men have sort of taken a bit of a backseat, and the female communicators are really taking it on, and now forcing the MPP female communicators. So there's a serious banter on social media. What advice would you want to give the MPP in terms of how they're handling this Professor Jane thing? And secondly, do you think Professor Jane should be the face of the campaign strategically? You notice that in 2008, 2012, the MPP strategically made Bawumia the face of the campaign, was going on, everywhere, as you call it, presenting papers and so on and so forth. And it was all about the economy. Should the NDC go the same direction, or they've got to be careful because of what we're beginning to see today and so on? So those for me are the two quick questions I'll ask you right after this break. Shamima will come in after your submission, and then Professor White. And then also I'm told that an independent candidate who has actually launched his campaign a few months back would also be joining us. He's the founder and lead of the People's Liberation Front Party, Ora Intim Ejakon. He's a lead of the Grand Coalition Ghana, based in diaspora, who has some thoughts to share as far as this is concerned. So it's a packed show. I'll take a break. I'll be right back. Professor Jane's speech, or the Professor Jane's official presentation to the public by the NDC as the running mate of John Dramani Mahama. I've been talking to Professor John Osai Kwapong. He's actually on Zoom. But Prof, you know what? I'm going to skip you and go to Shamima Muslim to pick just a brief thoughts before I go to Musa Dankwa. Shamima, thank you very much for accepting to join us on Inside Pages.
Good morning, Moro, and good morning to your listeners as well. And I am very happy to join you this morning.
All right, then. So we've been having a conversation about Professor Jane and essentially what she brings to the table for 2024 elections. Some are still looking back and saying that in 2020 she didn't make that much impact, and so They're wondering if in 2024 she will make that impact. But we're looking also at the woman we saw on Wednesday. She's a totally different woman. You don't think so?
No, she's not a totally different woman.
Okay.
She's the woman that you are now open to appreciating what her value is and how she brings that value to the table. I think that narrative you mentioned earlier about she not bringing anything to the table in 2020, it's a contrived narrative. And I think moving forward now, all of us, even as media and journalists, we must move away from that narrative. It's a contrived narrative.
Right.
Everybody who is speaking, I think that Prof. Naana's competence is without question. And I always tell people whether they know what it takes to lead a team, whether they know what leading a team means, no matter how small that team is, even a family unit, even a school platform on WhatsApp. Leading is not an easy thing to achieve. And we have Professor Nana Jane's profile, who rose through the ranks in academia. So if leading is difficult, go and try it in academia, where everybody is qualified, where everybody has PhD, where everybody is teaching. Try it. Try to lead a faculty, try to lead a department, try to grow and lead a school. Now try to even now be a vice chancellor, first female vice chancellor of a public university in Ghana. Her competence is without question. And for me as an advocate, I think that as a principled position, many of us in this advocacy space, we know that advocacy and mobilization without action would not yield us the fruits. And I've been reflecting, I'm saying that what do we want? More, I've been on your platform even before Prof was announced.
Yeah.
When she was announced 4 years ago, I was one of the voices that took the opportunity to step out, because we must recognize what we want when we get it, and we must reward those efforts. That is my principled position on this matter.
Right.
And it is votes that would make us break the glass ceiling. Because there are two things, and Dr. Kwapon mentioned it, that when an intentional action needs to be taken to bridge this gap that we've been talking about, a gap that exists because of historical evolutions, a gap that exists because of non-action by those in the power to take action and amplify through either elective positions or appointive positions. But in this case, with the running mate, it is both an appointive position and an elective position. So if JM has done the appointment or nomination, the next level of it is for the good people of Ghana to give it life. And I think the women groups, women movement, fathers, brothers, husbands, because I see a lot of fathers now investing in the education of their girls. I see husbands supportive of the career path of their women and the educational achievements of their women. I see brothers who stand in for their sisters, inspired by their feats. I have brothers who have always been on my back, supporting me, very proud of whatever I've been able to achieve for myself. They're my frontline support system, even as I sit today. Do you see it? So this kind of decision is not even for just the women's constituency. It's not for the academic constituency who must, be happy that yet again a member of their community has the potential to be elevated into the highest office of the land. I think the UCC community should all come out and rally behind Nana, because then again UCC would have the bragging rights of having delivered, the first female vice president, hopefully, if Allah wills it. So for me, let us move away from the narrative and focus on the now. We
Okay.
all evolve and grow into positions. Moro, you are not the journalist you are today that you were 10 years ago, or how many years ago when we were at Radio Universe, where I was also at Radio Universe. I see Michael Pesa White was also billed to speak. Michael Pesa White is the person that invited me to join student politics when I was in level 100 working at Radio Universe.
Interesting.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
So we all evolve and into positions. We just must be giving the support, the encouragement, and the platform to be able to show what our skills are. Whatever Prof has in her, she always had, because she has been a leader, she has led, and she has delivered. She's led teams and she has delivered. It is now time for us to give her the platform and to give her the support and support her with the resources so she can execute a competitive and a great campaign supporting the candidate of the NDC, President, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. That is where we should be focusing the argument on. And if there are any doubts, I think last Wednesday's delivery by Prof. Naana Jane should remove all those doubts.
Okay. Let me go to Musa Dankwa. Musa Dankwa is with the Global Info Analytics. Musa, so I'll come back to you because you are the numbers person. You've been looking at Professor Jane's appeal both within the NDC and outside of the NDC. Does the data that you have justify her choice? Because the political parties will be looking at how many votes she can bring to the table. Hello, Musa, can you hear me? If you can mute your microphone so that we can hear you, sir. Okay, Musa is not on here. So let me go to Tim Joff. Hello, good morning, sir.
I'm here.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Moro.
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, Musa,
Yes.
Musa, you're on.
Yeah, I'm on.
Yes. So I was just saying that you are the numbers person. You play with data based on scientific empirical research. If I haven't followed your work about Professor Jane Naana Opoku-Agyemang, and I'm watching this show this morning, and I'm thinking to myself, yes, she's an academic, she is a woman of integrity, all those values that you can associate with her, but how much vote, or how is she seen by both the persons in her party, there's the NDC, and also outside of the NDC? What do they make of her? What do they think of her?
Right. But Moro, before I address that, let me quickly go back to 2020 elections.
Okay.
And do some comparison with data. If you look at 2012 elections,
Right.
NDC improved in the central region by 1.5% when John Mahama was the president and Mr. Atta was the running mate. In 2016 elections, NDC dropped almost 9% in central region when His Excellency Mr. Atta was running mate. But in 2020, NDC went up 2.5% in central region compared to their previous election. And that was the highest increase in their share of voter regions in central region since 2008. Now, leave that and come to the current polling data that we have. We asked Ghanaian voters whether they support John Mahama's renomination of Professor Jane Naana Opoku as running mate. 60% said yes, they support that decision. 15 said no, they don't. And 25 were neutral about it. Now, if you break down this data into regions, her biggest support comes from Savannah region, 81% support. Northern region, 75%. Greater Accra, crucially, 73%. Central region, crucially, 72%. Western region, 69%. Water, 69%. Western North, 67%. Her lowest score is below 50, where in Bunu East and Afro region. Everywhere else, she's around 50%. That's why you didn't see a bit of resentment or confusion when she was announced, because frankly speaking, she's been accepted by many across. Now, if you look at the support she enjoys among first-time voters or experienced voters, about 56% of first-time voters support her nomination, compared to 14%, 15 who did not support, and 25 who were neutral. Among older voters, the support is much higher, 61%, compared to 14%. And then when you come to gender basis, 60% of men support her nomination, 16 oppose, and 24 neutral. Among women, it is 61% support, slightly higher than the men, 14% no support or no approve among women, and those who were neutral were 26%. Interestingly, If you look at political party affiliation, about 49% of MPP voters support her nomination. For NDC, it's 79, and I think Prof has mentioned that. For floating voters, it is 54%. For those who support other parties, 40%, and those who decline to disclose their party affiliation, 42%. Now look at this. For those who were voting for John Mahama, 75% of them support her nomination. For those who were voting for Baumia, 19% support her nomination. For those who were voting for Alan, 4% support her nomination. So you could see that there are people, they are not angry, they are not kind of, she doesn't put people off, even though they support, but they are voting for other candidates, which means that she did not really create enemy for herself after this nomination. So frankly, the data points that her overall nomination was received well by voters.
That's quite interesting. And I want to thank you very much, Mr. Dankwa, for sharing those statistics with us, because that then gives us context as to why she's been chosen as the running mate for His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. Thank you so very much, Musa. All right. Let me now go to another resource person to join us on the phone to have his bite on this particular issue. And I'm talking about Mr. Ora Intim Ejakon. He's based in the United States. He's the leader of the Grand Coalition Ghana. He's joined us via Zoom. Ora Intim Ejakon, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on Inside Pages. Hello, sir. Good morning. Okay. All right. My understanding is it's not on it. So, Prof, I'll come back to you before I go to Ora Intim Fojo. Now, I'm sure you've heard some of the things that have been said. I won't ask you the question because I'm sure you have some rebuttals or some reactions to make to some of the things that have been said.
Well, I think that much of what has been said, particularly from Dr. John Osai-Kwapon and then Musa, clearly sits within the framework of some of the factors that were at the background of why Professor Naana was chosen again. And that is to the extent that, I mean, scientific research we have done, I mean, I have been involved in some, clearly shows that she was
an overwhelming favorite.
Overwhelmingly favored by, I mean, the large majority of people across this country and across different demographics, young people, old people, I mean, adults, male, female, educated, uneducated, formal sector workers, informal sector workers, across the different religious divides as well. And I think it's largely because of the way she carries herself. She's somebody who, just by her appearance, I mean, you see a sense of somebody with dignity, somebody who respects herself. I mean, I don't really want to engage in, rebuttals necessarily, but I mean, to think of talking about chalk, I mean, when we are talking about somebody who started a project of building over 200 secondary schools, and you have MPP communicators talking about she didn't supply chalk.
That's one of the things that are true.
Yeah, I mean, that she didn't supply chalk to schools. I mean, did we ever had a chalk crisis?
What do you find wrong with that kind of
I mean, we never had the supply of chalk as a crisis in this country. So if you walk into one school and a teacher who is probably politically programmed to claim that she wasn't getting chalk or he wasn't getting chalk to teach, makes a comment and you take it to mean that that is something that speaks to the integrity of a minister, then you really need to have yourself well examined. And I think that is very unfortunate for anybody to make that.
Prof, I'll beg you, let me do this. Let me just rudely interrupt. I beg you. Let me just please indulge me. Let me talk to Ora Intim Ejakon, who is the leader of the Grand Coalition. Ora, it's good to have you. Good morning. How are you, sir? Hello, sir. Okay. Told us some network challenge. Okay, so once we sort it out, we'll come back to Ora. We call them the new kid on the block. It's a coalition that intends to spring a big surprise on Ghanaians. They tell us in 2024, and so we want to find out whether they will take a cue from what the NDC has done and to present a female a female running mate. Ora, are you on now, sir?
No, he's muted.
Yes, thank you very much for accepting to join us on Inside Pages here on Metro Television.
Oh, yeah, I am here.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure you watched the program. You saw everything that happened, or you may have listened to the program. What are your initial thoughts? And more importantly, you know, it's the Grand Coalition going to follow suit and perhaps get us another female running mate. But before then, how's the coalition doing anyway? How's the coalition doing? Is it on course?
Oh yes, the coalition is on course, and we are in constant communication, and people are actually happy with what is going on and our activities on the ground.
Okay. So this Grand Coalition, how many political organizations are, have come together to form this Grand Coalition?
As of now, we have 11 organizations.
Oh, I see. 11.
Yes.
I see. That's massive. And so in all, you're looking at how many followers of the coalition? How many are you looking at? If you were to give us a rough estimate.
Well, we are looking at getting not less than 200 seats in parliament.
I see.
And so we are doing massive work in the constituencies because Ghana is in a very bad shape under NDC and NPP. And we need to rescue the nation from this umbrella elephant syndrome that we are seeing in the country.
Okay.
People are poor, their pockets are empty, but they have no alternative. And so they follow NDC and NPP, knowing very well that these two parties are the neo-colonialist parties. They don't have anything good for Ghanaians.
Okay. So what are your brief thoughts? Right. So what are your brief thoughts of the big event that happened on Wednesday? The official outdooring on unveiling or the confirmation of Professor Jane Naana Kwajima as a running mate to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. What do you make of it?
Yeah, Naana Jane is an accomplished academician, and that is here to translate into political activism. But if we look at what has happened in Ghana, and I am going to say on authority that our country is in the state where it is right now because of our academicians. They have destroyed the country. Let us look at Professor Kwesi Botwe, the structural adjustment programs, the destruction and the selling of all the properties of Ghana through IMF. And these are supposed to be academicians knowing very well. You see, people have been using degrees. I am Dr. This, Dr. That to intimidate people and make themselves look so huge. And at the end of it all, they produce nothing. They rather cause damage to the country. It's about time we use Ifienyansa instead of book long.
That's interesting. But, Ora, whilst you were talking, somebody just sent a message and says I shall ask you that if you think that these academicians are the cause of our problems, why are you taking your kids to school? Because they are the ones who are teaching your kids. I'm sure they were the ones who have taught you too, to be able to speak the kind of nice English that you're speaking to us this morning. You have a problem with them?
Okay. I don't necessarily have problems with teachers and people in academia. That is not what I'm saying.
Okay, so what are you saying?
What I'm saying is the application of practical theory to practical actions. That is where the problem lies. Okay. They have the theory, but they cannot practice it. If there was the application of theory to practice,
okay,
we will not have seen what Uforiata did to Ghana's economy under this current administration.
Okay, that's interesting. So what's next for your coalition? I mean, you were in town just recently to launch it, and then you've gone back to the States. What's next? What should we be looking out for as far as the Grand Coalition is concerned?
Yeah, we have 10 members of the coalition still on the ground.
Okay.
We have our General Secretary, Misasa Ewuku, on the ground, and I'll be coming back very soon. We are actively going to be engaged with the Ghanaian public throughout this period until the the November elections. And so what I am here to do right now is mobilize Ghanaians around the globe to see exactly what NDC and MPP has done to Ghana within the last 32 years. They have destroyed the very foundation of the nation, and we need to rebuild everything. And so giving NDC and MPP another opportunity is to say, let us kill Ghana. And that is what they have done. We need to save the nation from this elephant syndrome, umbrella and elephant coming together to sink the nation. We need to save Ghana from that.
All right, Ura, you're a very busy man. I wouldn't want to take too much of your time, but I know you'll be coming to town. But let me be the first person to interview you when you come to town, sir.
I surely will give you that opportunity.
All right, so that you can come and share your vision with the populace about what your Grand Coalition stands for. So, Prof, we have just about 6 minutes to go. I'm going to share this between you and Professor John Osai Kwapong. So finally, how do you think we can, how do you think that Professor Jane can be deployed much more effectively and much more productively, let me put it that way, in the 2024 elections? Because there's some people who feel that in 2020, the NDC didn't make optimal use of her potential.
So I think, admittedly, in 2020, her announcements came late. If I'm not mistaken, it was in July, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And so, obviously, for a country this size, and the fact that people want to have a real feel of the personalities on the tickets before making the decision. I think enough time wasn't at her disposal.
Right.
But what is going to happen, in my view, is that what happened in 2020 provides a basis for what is going to happen in 2024. Right. There is a sense in which she's no longer somebody who is now going to be introducing herself. And I think that also became clear in her speech. If you look at the 2020 speech, quite a significant number of paragraphs were spent introducing herself in terms of talking about her background, who she was, who she is, what she's been up to, and why she has accepted the nomination, and so on and so forth. In this 2024 speech, she went straight at the things that are of great concern to Ghanaians in terms of the near collapse of our economy, the lived experiences, the hallowing experiences of Ghanaians across the length and breadth of this country.
Are you expecting her to carry that through to wherever she's going across the country?
I think
or she's
that...
leave that at the podium?
No, I think that if you look at the review, the post-speech review,
yes,
you will find that many Ghanaians really want to be sure that she continues to echo these points. Of course, you could hear the applause when she made the point that anybody who participated in the plunder of this economy would not go scot-free.
Yes.
And then she said it's not a threat, but it's a promise.
It's a promise, yes.
And that really vibrated very well, because people really think that, we have had mothers dying in childbirth because somebody is taking state money to basically lavishly spend on needless things.
Yeah.
So there are schools in communities that are still either dilapidated or under trees when monies are being spent in Accra in reckless manner. There are bridges that needs to be built to ensure that your typical tomato, plantain, and other things get to the cities that are not happening. And the farmers are basically wasting away, both in terms of their energy and then also aging, and they are not making any resources out of whatever they have committed themselves to.
Okay.
So I think that in the coming days, she will combine both talking about the vision of the NDC, and of course, the vision will have to be premised largely on what the problem definitions of the country currently are.
Okay.
And the problem definitions cannot be decoupled from what it is that the MPP has done over the last 7 years in terms of the loot, in terms of the recklessness, in terms of the deception, in terms of the lies, in terms of the cronyism, in terms of all the corruption that has taken place. And so I think that a large majority of the Ghanaian populace are looking for somebody who can speak to these matters so that they are not swept under the carpet. Ghanaians want to be reminded that the NDC knows about these things. Right. And let me just make a quick point on Ola and co. I think that it is great that we have people in the diaspora who are interested in coming back to get into the political fray. I will rather appeal to them that between the NDC and the MPP, there is now clarity that these are not the same parties. These parties are not the same. And that the NDC has a better, outlook in terms of its performance whenever it's in government, even from the days of PNDC all the way down till now. And that if they really are mobilizing some forces, they should come and have a conversation with us, and that we'll be more than happy to provide a room for them.
Okay.
Because we are a party of, different shades of people, very accommodating. The umbrella is big enough to cover everybody. And so rather than maybe they and any other party coming in and possibly pushing the election into a second round, which I don't think it will be, because all the polls clearly indicate that this is going to be a one landslide victory for the NDC. And let me say that those who are planning to steal or those who are planning to cause mayhem in order to steal the verdict of the people, they have gotten it wrong this time round. And they will see the extent to which people would defend that they are single votes when that opportunity comes.
Professor John Osei-Kwapong, we have just a minute and a half. I don't know how we're going to do this, but should Prof be the face of the campaign, the NDC campaign, in 2024? Professor John Osei-Kwapong. Oh, okay. All right. Looks like we don't have him on the line. So yes. So I guess that this is where we're gonna end it. Quite a number of messages. I don't know how we're gonna do this, but this one says, Professor, okay. It's not Mesa White. Okay, so Professor White has done a yeoman's job today. Prof, why don't you appear on platforms like this very often? I think that this is what we in the academia want to hear, and not the usual rabble-rousing and pedestrian analysis that we hear on some other platforms. That's coming from Nina Osei Tutu. Okay, thank you very much, Nina, for that. And this one here says that, good morning, Moro. Wonderful show, more substance than form. I like the resource persons you've gathered, except the last person. Okay, so I beg you, I'm not too comfortable when you take on individuals and make it look like they are less or more. It's something I'm not comfortable with. But I get the import of your message. And let me read the final one. Here. It says that, look, Moro, I am MPP, but I will vote for the NDC because of Professor Jane. I think we need to try something differently. The good old Prof is simply awesome. It's coming from Osei Chichi. I think it's Osei Chichi Poku from Ashanti region, but he doesn't tell us where exactly in the Ashanti region. Anyway, so that's it, Prof. I guess that we're done for the day. And so she's going to Central region, apparently. Yes. And I'm sure that the Central region is the region that's going to kickstart.
She needs to start from home.
From home. Yeah. And they call it the homecoming.
Absolutely.
Of the good old Prof. Would see how that, sorry, just briefly, in 30 seconds, you know what MPP did was they actually camped Bami and the Northern Beach for a very long time just to make sure that he garners as much votes as possible. Is that the same strategy the NDC intends to deploy? What do you know?
Well, I'm not in the position to disclose what the strategy will be, but definitely it will be something that will produce results.
Okay, all right. Professor White, Michael Professor White is an academician par excellence. He's a lecturer at University of Ghana, Legon, a political strategist, political communications avatar, etc., etc. I want to thank you very much for your time. And also, Professor John Osei-Kwapong is a fellow with CDD Ghana, and also a political science analyst, and also Musa Dankwa, Global Info Analytics. Thank you very much for your time. And also, I want to say a big thanks to Ora Intimejako, who is the leader of the Grand Coalition, who seems to have an issue with academics. He says they're not, they're not building this country, they're not helping this country to develop. But anyway, my name is Audu Moro. Thanks for watching. And also Shamima Muslim. Thank you very much, all of you, for making this show a success. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.